we thought that because there are constitutional issues involved in relation to water, that it would be appropriate to invite Alan Jones to speak. I'll come back to those constitutional issues in a later program. But very briefly, at the time of Federation, the question of building dams was a matter for the states. The Commonwealth was involved peripherally in relation to navigation on the Murray-Darling, but the Commonwealth was not elsewise involved in relation to dams. The Commonwealth had very important things like defence. And you can see what's happened. The Commonwealth has moved into everything else and abandoned its core functions, particularly defence. The consequence is we are defenceless and we're getting no dams. That's the consequence of letting the Commonwealth have powers which it was never intended to have. I'll come back to that later, but the important thing now is Alan Jones, because Alan Jones, as you will recall, we played the introduction to the Neville Bonner oration where he said some very kind words about Tony Abbott, who introduced him, and also some nice words about me, and then spoke very briefly about the issue. But here we're bringing Alan Jones' oration, or parts of it, in the Neville Bonner oration. And the reason is that what he has to say is so important for the future of this country. And what Alan will say is threefold in relation to the watering of this continent. He says, firstly, we have enough water in Australia. The idea that this country is too dry is not true. We do have enough water. The problem is it falls in the wrong places. And he also comes to another conclusion. We don't recycle water enough. And in that regard, he looks to Singapore, where recycling is done to the most pure standard you could imagine. I think you'll find that with his passion and with his research, he's well worth listening, and his message. Only his message, in many ways, will save this nation. Alan Jones.
Drought-proofing Australia. If there's one aspect of public administration that highlights the incompetence and indifference of government, it must surely be water management over the last any number of years. And therefore, based on what we know of that period, it's hard to be optimistic about politicians getting the nation out of the mess that politicians have put us in. It is absolutely essential that the national government take responsibility for a national crisis. And it's taken us a long time to get to this point. John Howard, as Prime Minister, said that we're going to have to pay more for water, and by that he meant a price that reflects the cost of recovering, storing and replacing supplies of water, not just the cost of delivering it. Well, the public may well be prepared to pay more for water if they could be guaranteed supply. And that essentially applies to people in the bush. For example, there is a dishonest argument that we are a nation short of water. Every day you've got nearly 4 billion litres of water not used in the Ord River system in Western Australia. 4 billion litres every day, and the Fitzroy River system is 50 times greater than the Ord. Only 10% of Lake Argyle's water is used for the Ord irrigation system. 45 tonnes of water a second is pushed every day into the Timor Sea. 45 tonnes of water a second. 4 billion litres a day. Queensland. Go northeast of Queensland, 11 o'clock approximately on that map of Queensland. Northeast has 4 times the water of the Murray-Darling Basin. The total flow down the Murray-Darling Basin is less than 23,000 gigalitres. In the northeast coastal region of Queensland, 70,000 gigalitres flow into the sea. You have to wonder whether we haven't left our brains behind. A gigalitre is 1,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So northeast Queensland has 70,000 multiplied by 1,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools flowing into the ocean. The Gulf of Carpentaria, that's the northeast, this is going out west now, the Gulf of Carpentaria, has 130,000 available gigalitres. 130,000 times 1,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. You think of this. Or 400 billion litres of sewage. Most of it untreated, goes into the ocean just off the coast of Sydney every year. 400 billion litres. Remember one thing, we flush our toilet with the same water that we make our tea with. What a waste. I'll come to that in a moment. 90% of Singapore's water used to be piped from Malaysia ever since Singapore gained independence. When it came around to renewing the licence for the water, the costs had escalated so much that Singapore could no longer afford to buy its water from Malaysia. Almost 20 years ago, Singapore started replanning its water and sewage strategy. It's now completed the installation of a brand new sewerage system, which, when fully operational, will recycle reprocessed sewage water 100% fit for human consumption. Singapore. Not a syllable in Canberra about any of this. Because Canberra for years has been a prisoner of the Wentworth Group. Isn't that appropriately named? Continue to tell you that diverting water is snake oil stuff. We're told we can't use the Ord River surplus, we can't use the northeast Queensland water, we can't build dams, when it rains we can't harvest the water, but we can build a 3,200 kilometre pipeline to carry gas from Papua New Guinea to Brisbane. We can build a fairly useless railway line from Darwin to Alice Springs with nothing to put on the carriages. We can't harvest water, we can't transport water, and we can't dam it. Well, consider Libya as an example. 95% of Libya is desert. They have the largest water transport project in the world. It cost US $25 billion. It's the Great Man-Made River Authority. It was launched in 1983. Oh, we laugh at Libya now. They need a spring offensive. They're 10th world compared to us, really. 1983. They moved water through pipes 4 metres in diameter, over 1,200 kilometres of desert plain, 700 kilometres of rocky plateaus, cliffs and dry riverbeds. The total depth of the wells which have been drilled for the project, 1,300 of them, the total depth is more than 70 times the height of Mount Everest. Some of the 1,300 wells have been drilled up to 500 metres deep. They pump 700 trillion litres of water a minute to supply 2 million square metres of water, remember it's desert, a day to Benghazi, Libya's second largest city. The second stage of the project was finished in September 2000, completely watering Tripoli. The Libyans can do it, we can't.